Disruption is a term that was coined by Clayton Christensen, an economist from the US. And what it basically describes is how an exponentially growing business model outruns a linearly growing business model. Let's take an example. Nokia and the smartphones. Nokia was disrupted by Apple, basically. And this was not because Nokia was not able to build good hardware and good phones. It's because what Steve Jobs achieved was he saw that there was a need in the market to actually enable developers to use a platform to put functionality on the phones. So what disrupted, in my view, Nokia was the App Store concept. Because the App Store concept gave developers the possibility to write software in a standardized environment, and users could now all of a sudden make their smartphone into all kinds of other devices, thereby increasing the value of the smartphone. And in the beginning, of course, no one really believed in Apple. However, only Google saw what was coming and 1 year later launched Android. Today we all know our phone is our camera, it's our mirror, it's our calendar, it's our everything, and we will not leave our homes with it. Many people actually get paranoid. So what does that have to do with climate change? Climate change is currently, or the CO2 levels in the atmosphere are currently exponentially growing. So we need something even faster growing to stop this from happening. This can be done, of course, by reducing the emissions, which is something we have to do, should do, and which should have the highest priority. But we will also need to do something even more, probably pull out CO2. But this will never work, because disruption works in a way that you need three parts to come together. It's not only about technology, you also need a demand in the market. So the consumers wanted the functionality that the App Store and the iPhone were offering to the market. And you also need the business model. So the developers wanted to earn money on these apps, because otherwise no one likes to work for free. So you give an incentive. Market and business models and technology, they are playing in a playing ground or playing field. And this playing field is defined by politicians. So the politicians have to set the ground for a playing field that actually enables these disruptive business models, just like the iPhone enabled the App Store. That's what we need for climate change. How could they do that? Well, for one, the European countries are doing an okay job. They have the ETS system, where you have to pay for carbon emissions. However, there's still a lot of carbon emissions given out for free that should be stopped. Furthermore, embodied CO2 in products produced in China and embodied in the transport to Europe from China is not taxed. So that gives an incentive to produce elsewhere than the European Union. We need to change this system so that we maybe have a border carbon tax, as was actually suggested by Ursula von der Leyen in her new order to the Commission. And then the last thing we maybe should do is put more money into research. We should not just use these CO2 taxes or CO2 emission, the money that comes from that, for welfare and all kinds of other things. We should start using much more on research, but we should also honor countries that actually have, for example, negative CO2 emissions by paying them for absorbing this CO2, giving other places an incentive. And we need to construct this system in a way so it is actually growing, so that other countries who are not part of the ETS would like to join, because there are incentives to join, because the stronger and the more are in such a system, the stronger the system will be. So politics setting this play field, the technology, we do have the technology, we do lack the business models to earn money on doing something about CO2 emissions. Because if a company does something, they could choose between 0 emissions or 1,000-ton emissions, then the problem is the 0 emissions is so much higher that the customer is normally not willing to pay. And this is because the competitors have the possibility of offering the same value proposition, the same solution, without doing the 0 emission solution. So by putting the cost of the emissions directly into all products, this will force the industry to much quicker adapt, and it will force disruptive business models to emerge, because who does not want to be the next market leader? Who does not want to be the next Apple? I for sure would love to be.